We often hear the statistic that 1 in 4 people will develop a mental illness at some time in their lives. No age group is immune, but many illnesses first emerge in adolescence or early adulthood. As an educator, I share the hopes and dreams of my students, and I'm privileged to be involved in shaping their education. Perhaps the biggest privilege comes, though, when students trust me and talk to me when things go wrong, when they feel helpless. At those times, I do everything that I can to help. I'd like to share the narrative of a woman who became ill when she was a young student. She lost hope, and this is her story. I'm not quite sure where this story begins, or even if it has a natural beginning, but I'll start with darkness. Darkness is a room without windows and without walls. It is endless, it's relentless, and at the same time, it's crushingly small. There's no respite within this room. Darkness and nighttime ordinarily evoke feelings of restful quiet, but this room is full of terror, and it's full of screaming. This means that there's never rest, there's never peace, there's never quiet. I think the noise comes from within me, but sometimes it's the culmination of all the sounds and voices from outside my head, sounds that can't and won't be silenced, that prevent my mind from being at rest, even if my body is so utterly exhausted that it doesn't want me to move. Where do I go to escape from this? Well, there isn't a place, because the darkness and the noise follow. So instead, I go to places that aren't anywhere. I sit on the stairs underneath the dining room table, 2 nowhere places. Otherwise, I'm compelled to keep moving, just to try to keep pace with my thoughts and to escape from me. I move from the chair, from the book, from the office, from the garden, from the sofa, from the computer, from my desk, from other people, all in an effort to try to keep pace with my thoughts and to move away from me. I always follow. So does noise, and so does the need to find a moment of peace. Why the stairs then, and why under the table, these 2 nowhere places? Well, because I'm not going to see anybody else there. The logical questions would be, what is the nature and content of these thoughts, and why not simply change thinking? The nature of this is it takes away the ability to stop thinking and change it. This is why the room feels crushing and expansive at the same time. Maintaining this state of being whilst giving the appearance of normality on the outside feels like balancing a bear on a strand of silk. I do this day in, day out. I keep working, I keep breathing, but sometimes it isn't living. It seems that there are only 2 choices. Control the bear, keep moving, or end everything and find ultimate peace. Ultimate peace is nothingness, no blackness because nothing exists, no movement of my body, no movement of my mind, just nothing. The closest I've been to this is the split second of bliss before the oblivion of a general anaesthetic. Unfortunately, it's tricky to get one's hands on these prescriptions. Getting to nothingness would be relatively simple. I know what to do, I know how to do it, but be in no doubt. It's horrendous and it is tragic beyond measure, but suicide is not a cowardly act. In imagining the process, I imagine failure. Failure would break the silk and unleash the bear. So I keep the bear balanced. I keep moving. I keep moving. Fear of failure has prevented me from carrying out my plans, as has love. Love doesn't reduce pain, but it protects against the damage that pain can inflict. During these times of extreme distress, I more than think, I know that I won't recover. And so those around me should let me go. But I'm a scientist, and I've spent a little bit of time reading and thinking about the philosophy of science. Now, the great ecologist Stephen Fretwell wrote about the nature of truth and knowledge and the difference between these two things. And he said that the truth is it. It's the underlying reality of all existence. Knowledge is what we think we know about truth. But knowledge, however, is always an imperfect assessment. And the realization that there are discrepancies and inaccuracies in knowledge is wisdom. Wisdom leads to a process by which our knowledge is modified to better fit the truth. Gradually, my knowledge modified to better fit the truth that eventually I would recover. This shift has taken time, and it's taken a lot of hard work. One of the hardest things was acceptance, and acceptance for me came from a new understanding of myself, derived from many an hour sitting with my therapist, with my GP, with my psychiatrist, and from applying my scientific brain to understanding the science of biology of mental illness and of therapy. When reading, my brain would allow reading, I read textbooks about psychiatry, about medication, about therapy, and many scientific papers. This growing understanding of myself were crucial in my recovery, as were a particularly harrowing but necessary few sessions of therapy during which we addressed darkness. I also needed to get some decent drugs, prescription, you understand. Sometimes the best way to face a bear is actually to lie down and keep still. But this isn't the same as giving up. But perhaps by learning to fight illness, I might learn to recover, to stop fighting myself. This happened when I accepted the help of other people. I'm enormously fortunate in my life. I have a partner and friends with enormous hearts, insight into my darkest moods, and they're stubborn, and they don't give up on me, even when the wall that I build around myself is impenetrable. I think you all know who you are. I'm also fortunate to have worked with a talented and compassionate therapist and a very intelligent and very human GP. And she's anything but bumbling, and that's your word, Dr. Kate, not mine. Some of these people have undoubtedly saved my life just by sitting beside me and accepting me for who I am without judgment. We tend to think in medicine that the heroes are the scalpel-wielding surgeons and the doctors who leap out of helicopters. But perhaps the true heroes are doctors who are just themselves, and by giving time and compassion and patience, working to find the balance of medication, choosing words carefully, saved my life when I had no hope and no will to continue. There are some words that are burned into my brain. You've been well before, so you can be well again. That bumbling GP again. Refrain from making major, irreversible decisions. I forbid it. Word from a kind psychiatrist. There seems to me to be a schism in the way that people define and classify mental illness. On the one side is the psychosocial model. My understanding of this view is that we, our minds and our thinking, are the product of life circumstances, events, and our personality. Mental ill health isn't biological in nature. It's not a disorder of the brain, so medicine has little value. On the other side is the medical model. Mental illness is the result of disordered brain structure, function, or chemistry. This needs to be corrected. If we can classify it and diagnose it, we can treat it. To me, polarity of thinking makes no sense, and it does a disservice to people in distress. Interventions need to be targeted, they need to be appropriate, and they need to come without the stigma and baggage attached by some people to medication or to talking therapy. We need a middle ground on this, and I think progress towards one is being made. Therapy and understanding have been central to my recovery, but I couldn't have managed without medication. Of course, there are side effects that I don't like, and some medicines made me feel worse. but there are 4 that, when taken together, made me feel better. I continue to take them and will do so for as long as I need to. I used to rebel against them big time, and I used to resist them, but now I've made my peace with them. Of course, for some people, medication isn't appropriate, and the wrong drug can exacerbate symptoms. But my hope is that one day, with advances in molecular medicine, medication trial and error will be a thing of the past. I think that medication does work, but perhaps not quite in the way that we think, or in the way that it's advertised to. Similarly, I think that some of our knowledge around the biology of mental illness doesn't fit the truth and requires modification. New research into brain function and the interplay between nerve cells and glial cells. Now, glial cells are cells that have been quite neglected. They were once thought to be the supporting actors in the complex play of the neurons. This is opening up hope for new treatment possibilities. Post-mortem studies on the brains of people who have died by suicide have revealed that in many cases, inflammation was occurring, and often it's the glial cells that are inflamed. Now, inflamed organs rarely work properly. What's interesting is that recently it's been demonstrated that if you treat people with certain types of brain tumours with high doses of antidepressants, it can slow the progression of the tumour. So I wonder if some of the antidepressant effect of these drugs is mediated by an effect on the glia as well as the neurotransmitters. Other types of glial cells help to reset the balance of ions after a nerve impulse is fired. And I wonder if the mood-stabilizing effect of some anti-seizure drugs results in the correction of these ions in the absence of correct glial cell function. Who knows, but I'm sure for some people, these drugs are lifesavers. I'll finish with some thoughts about psychological therapy. Now, as with medication, finding the right therapist and the right approaches are crucial. Just as one drug doesn't work for everybody, neither does a single therapeutic approach. I've been fortunate to work with a therapist called June. Now, she's a bit wappy, and she's enormously talented and compassionate, and she has a huge knowledge of evidence-based therapies. Therapy sessions have been characterized by mutual trust, respect, and honesty. They've also been characterized by June's continued and careful assessment of my mind and the state that I've been in. The word assessment is derived from Latin, and it means to sit down beside or to counsel. And to sit beside somebody who's in great distress without judging them and without telling them what to think or how to feel is probably the most powerful medicine. We set achievable goals. Go out for a meal. Sit still in the garden for 15 minutes. Sit still in the garden for 15 minutes? That doesn't sound that difficult, does it? But believe me, it is. We celebrated when I met these goals, and we tried to find the reasons when we didn't. We also explored the thing that underpins my mental distress and is the source of terror. That is the darkness and the chaos that it brings. We did this using a combination of drawing, writing, and talking. And by drawing darkness and seeing myself in it, I was able to articulate the chaos of my mind. On a scale of difficulty, these sessions were probably the most difficult thing I've done in my life, and I imagine they weren't very easy for June either. My therapeutic journey isn't finished, but because of therapy, because of medication, care, and compassion and love, I'm alive. More than that, I'm living, and that really feels quite great. So, gradually, there was the emergence of light, and then the world began to get colour back, and texture returned. Hope, you know, it sometimes finds us instead of us finding it. I stumbled upon an orphan blackbird next to her dead parents, and I took her in. She was with me for 2 weeks. I brought her to work every day, and she came into the garden with me in the evenings and at the weekends. We established a routine of feeds every 20 minutes or so. Flight school had commenced, and I could see the complex equations of the physics of flight clicking into place. Out of the blue, she died, and it broke my heart, but it felt very, very different from the chaos of mental illness. I'd felt love, I'd felt hope, though, and I'd felt a strong responsibility. And these were very, very strong reminders of the emotions I once know. This gave me 3 very good reasons to face my bear, to tame it and learn to live. Why then is a marine biologist and a teacher standing here today, crossing paths with psychiatry and with psychology? Well, the reason's simple, and I'm sure you've guessed it by now. The narrative is mine. It's the story of my need to try to understand the chaos of my mind by learning about the science of mental illness. I was first ill in my early 20s as a young student, and I nearly walked out on my studies and on my life, but I didn't. The bear's been with me in the 3 decades since. Sometimes it's sleeping. Sometimes it's almost breaking the silk. But I've learned that I need to pay it attention. I need to know that I disturbed this bear at my peril. Now, I take time and take notice of joy, wherever that might be. So I'm a marine biologist, and joy can be found looking at the organisms under a microscope, or it can be found sharing these discoveries with students. The most important thing I've learned to do, though, is not to take myself too seriously, and every day I make sure I laugh, and everybody should have some hens. I take time to stop and pay attention to the world instead of rushing through my thoughts like a runaway train. And I ensure that I allow myself the peace and the simplicity of walking along a beach, holding hands, feeling happy and feeling at peace. Now, students, I'm talking to you now. And if you've heard nothing else, hear this. If you're listening to this from a position of hopelessness, please seek help. You're very, very precious people. For goodness sake, refrain from making major, irreversible decisions. I forbid it. And remember, as I do when it gets dark, that knowledge is what we think we know about truth. Thank you very much.